My father's family came from an area close to Austria. And the Austrian people are totally different than the German people, although they speak the same language. So, but I don't know much about the Snyder side. So, and my mother was English Welsh, and so I'm kind of a mixture. Father, when he was younger, his father was in the meat business. I think his father grew up in a grocery store on 7th and North Carolina Avenue in D.C. And somehow he got into the meat business in what was called the Center Market, which was at 7th and Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. And it was a very famous market. And my father had been sick when he was younger, and they thought he had tuberculosis. Well, this was like he was born in 1880, so this was probably 1897 or something like that. And I remember he told me he slept outside, and he thought the fresh air was, and he ended up going to work in his father's meat business. And he was there, and then when his father died, he took over the business. They had a big meat business. Not only did they have a meat stand, but they sold all the main hotels. And so my father was almost 50 when I was born, so, and I had 2 older brothers and an older sister. So I grew up after World War II, as opposed to their growing up before World War II, which made a big difference in things like smoking and my older brother was a little bit like a father to me in terms of encouraging me to go in the building business. And my mother was like 39 when I was born. I'm not sure I was expected because they built a new house and it didn't have a bedroom for me. But my mother and father lived with her mother and father from the time they got married till I was born in 1929. And then they moved to a new house in Washington, kind of in Washington. Yeah, in Washington. And so they could have a little independence, they built this house down here and spent the summers in Bay Ridge. They built the house in 1922, 7 years before I was born. So, and my father loved it down here. My mother wasn't that nuts about it because she felt like she had to do all the work, which I guess.
And that's here on River Drive?
Yeah, I was on River Drive, 20 River Drive.
Okay.
And so I remember growing up down here in the summer. You know, we'd come down the day school closed and go back the day when school started again. But I think it kind of molded my life, being here and before television, before computers or anything like that, so you had to entertain yourself. And I think that helped me develop some creativity, which I was then able to use later. I'm kind of multifaceted like you are. I mean, I'm interested in everything. And I think being on my own a lot down here helped me to develop a lot of interests in a lot of different things. And I had these older brothers and sisters that taught me a lot and looked out for me. Yeah, everything was a summer house. It was not, nobody lived here year round except for maybe a cop. They always had a cop here.
This was
a lot of stuff like that to remember. one of the things I did as a teenager, another guy and I don't know why, we got shovels and we went down to where the inlet is now from the bay. It was a sandbar that went all the way from Bay Ridge, all the way across to Annapolis Roads. And you'd have to go down there. It was only like, wasn't too different than Black Walnut is now, just a little bit of water coming through. You'd have to kind of drag your boat through there. And then you'd have to come all the way back down the sandbar until you got to Bay Ridge. And then you went back out. There was an island in front of where Doug Gray lives on Sands Avenue. And you go by that island and you go into the lake. And so we just, I don't know what possessed us, but we dug a trench through the sandbar down toward right where the inlet is now. And the water started running through. That was at the end of the summer. Came back the next, that was in the fall, before, the end of August. Came back in June, and the daggone thing was like 10 feet deep and 25 feet wide. We just happened to pick the natural place where the water would cut through. Well, there were really two periods down here. One when I was a little kid, and then another one as a teenager. And one of the nice things about being a teenager, I was one of the few boys. There were about 8 or 10 girls, and we all hung out together. So, but I taught myself to sail. I just took the boat out and started sailing. It jibed a few times, but that taught me not to do that.
Yeah, learn how the boom comes across.
Right. I used to go fishing. Our fishing, we had a rowboat, custom. Somebody built a rowboat. Not us. I mean, my father bought this rowboat, and he was a big fisherman. And we'd row out straight in front of the house, lining up with the front walk that went up to the house, and we'd go till we could see Thomas Point Light. No, Thomas Point itself, and then we'd anchor there, and there was a oyster bed there. That's how we could tell where we were. So we'd go out there and fish, and I remember the sky was totally different then than it is now, because you didn't have any light pollution. It was gorgeous. I mean, the Milky Way, really pronounced. So I remember at the end of, is this Bainbridge you said? At the end of Bainbridge, there were a lot of little docks and posts, and there was a steel pipe, about a 2-inch steel pipe that was under the water, and I ran the boat up on that, cut a hole in the bottom of my brother's boat. This is a boat they built. My brother went to University of Michigan, studied engineering, and he designed and built, my brothers built this boat. It was a round bottom boat. He designed the whole thing, sailed great. And that panicked me, but it was easy to fix. Mm-hmm. Just put a plate on the inside and sistered the stuff together. But I used to sail that a lot, and then later they bought a Hampton One design and sailed it up here from Cambridge, where they picked it up. I was kind of too young to go on that trip, but I sailed that a lot, or raced a lot. We'd sail over to, we had a little trailer, and we'd take it on the trailer, and there was no bridge. We'd put it on the ferry and go across, go to Cambridge, and we'd tell everybody we belonged to the Annapolis Yacht Club, so we could use the yacht club there. And I don't know how many trips we went on with that boat sailing in races. The best I ever came in was third. Everybody else, a lot of the guys like Jack Martin and Sonny Smith would spend a lot of money and put aluminum center boards in and better sales, so I couldn't compete with that, but we had a good time. We'd sleep in the boat between one person on either side of the centerboard, take sleeping bags. And another interesting thing was they had a civic association, which wasn't anything like what we have now. And I don't know how that happened, but I thought that what we should do is build. They kept talking about raising all this money and building this building, and they had already gotten that land from Cass where the existing clubhouse is. So I said to my father, why don't they just build something? And I think I went to the meeting and he let me talk. I was, I think, president of the Junior Civic Association. And they thought that was a great idea, and so we got that thing and built it, and I helped lay cinder block in that building. I was like 16 years old. And I remember after the hurricane, the wind shifted around to the northwest and blew so hard that really took the water out of the bay. You could walk from Bay Ridge over to a pier that was in front of Annapolis Roads Club. There was a big white building that looked like a wedding cake that they built as a community thing. And they had a pier that went out to where it was deep enough, and they had a diving board on the end of it. And you could walk all the way out to the end of that pier. That's how, there wasn't any water. It was weird. So, and, I remember the first jamboree. It was over at a guy named George Hughley, who was in the lumber business, had a house over on Bay Drive, and we had it was basically a cake sale. And I remember being in the parade, 4th of July parade. I was dressed up like George Washington. And my father, not as much as my father telling stories about it icing it, told me about somebody tried to drive their car across and it went through. And I remember I built an ice boat. We ought to do that this winter if it ices up. You and Mark and I'll build an ice boat.
Yeah.
You don't have to make it fancy. You just put one board this way and another board this way, and just use some aluminum flashing to wrap around the outrigger and the wood to slide on the ice, and just use a sail off of a little boat. You go with the wind. And Eddie was a wild man. He had gone away to military school, so he knew everything. I didn't know anything. So we sailed down the bay, and another cold front came through, ripped the sail right in half, and it had a motor on it. And it got dark, and we're out there, big waves. So we just cruised down the shore, but the problem was there were all these fish nets. So I had to sit up on the boom and with a spotlight looking for fish nets. Finally got into, this was when I was in college, finally got into Solomon's Island. And I had to get back to college. I had to leave to go back to school. So I told him, I said, I can't go back. I was a little nervous because, another thing that happened, we had all the portholes open. And when that wind came up, the water was pouring in the porthole. We didn't know what we were doing. I got out of college. When I went to college, I was interested in architecture. And I studied some architecture. And I wasn't a very good student, so I took things I thought I could handle. So I took economics, I took English. I took English because I was very poor in reading and writing and spelling. And so I just took, today they have all this stuff about designing this course that you're going to have in college. I didn't do that, I just took what I wanted. Nobody supervised me. There weren't any there weren't any advisors or anything like that. So I just, but anyhow, when I got out, I had my father died during final exams. That was interesting. My junior year. And I went home for the funeral, and I went back and nobody was there. Like, when I got out of school, my brother was an appraiser, real estate appraiser, and the other one was selling commercial real estate. So my older brother, Charlie, who was like 12 years older than I was, he kind of guided me into building a house. So I built a house, sold it, then I built a couple more houses, and I got married. Then I talked my other brother into coming in business with me, and we combined his commercial real estate with building. And so we just sort of developed. My father had a really good reputation with the bank, and so we were able to go to the bank and borrow money to run the company. I mean, it isn't that way anymore, but without that, I don't know where we'd be. So my father used to invite all the people from Riggs Bank down here to a picnic every year. So I knew all these people from the time I was like this high. So it was very interesting. So then I started building, and then my brother came in with me, and he had negotiated a lease between the owner of the Shoreham Hotel, a fellow named Bernie Braylove, and Mobil Oil Company. The oil companies would find a site they wanted, get an investor to buy it, get the investor to hire somebody to build a building, and then they'd lease it. They didn't want to own the real estate. So we built one gas station, and we were so low on our price, we didn't know what we were doing. I was bidding against Sarah's grandfather. I never met him until after I knew Sarah. But anyhow, so we were building up to 25, 30 gas stations a year. Didn't take a lot of capital. And then my brother worked for a real estate company over in Virginia, the older brother, Charlie, and he made a deal for me with them where they developed property, and I would buy a lot from them, but I'd just build on it and pay them when I sold the house, and give them the sales commission and all, and the mortgage loan, and that really got me going. And then we started building in Maryland too, and things just sort of accelerated. I had a friend that I was buying lumber from, and his brother was a very wealthy investor, and he bought the money. He put up the money for us to buy what was called Old Farm. It was 250 houses we built, and then from there we went to Gaithersburg and built Montgomery Village, which was like bigger than Annapolis, 35,000 people, 40,000 people, and 12,000 homes. So I used to go up to Hidden Valley to ski, and the guy that owned it really didn't know what he was doing. And I bought a piece of ground from him to give him some cash, and another guy and I built houses there. And I got my nephew, who had just come out of, I encouraged him to go in the building business, and I told him, don't build any houses up there, like, he supervised the construction of these 30 houses that we built, my friend and I. And we had, not only the ski business, we had a food business, a beverage business, a real estate business, golf course. It's a major deal. It's like 1,500 acres, top of the mountain. When you built the golf course, you had to make the dirt. We had 2 rock pickers. They'd go through, and these machines would actually pick up the rocks. And We'd hit old coal mines. I got married the second time. Sarah and I said, why don't we just take the boat down to Florida for our honeymoon? So I did all this work on the boat to get it ready to go, you know. We got from here to the nuclear power plant and lost one engine overheating. I had a mechanic that worked for the company who took care of the engines. Well, the problem is on that thing, the threads are the same, go the same way as the wheel turns. So, and you're supposed to use a lock washer in there to keep it from spinning off. Well, this thing would just spin off. So I ended up getting to Solomon's Island. I called him up. He came down. He'd been drinking a lot. And he fixed it the same way it had been fixed wrong the first time. And the next day we took off and went down. We went to the Tides Inn. Let's see. Oh, that day we went to the Tides Inn, and it was running fine. We got there that night. It was a gorgeous, no wind night. The water was beautiful. Went into the river, the inlet where the Tides Inn was. It was so dark, you couldn't see anything. I didn't know where to go. So we finally found the Tides Inn. We spent the night there, 1 or 2 nights there. Then we went down to Coinjock, and I was south of Norfolk, going, I guess it's called the Caratuck Sound. Beautiful. And the thing happened again. So I crept into Coinjock and got a real mechanic to come and fix it.